الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على سيدنا ونبينا محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
Brothers and sisters in Islam, Assalamu alaikum jami'an wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam.
We'll begin our discussion on the verses of the Holy Qur'an by a recitation of these blessed verses of Surah An-Nisa, which is on page 99 of the standard Az-Zahraa Qur'an. And according to the verses of Surah An-Nisa, verses 128 to 134. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وإن امرأة خافت من بعلها نشوزا أو إعراضا فلا جناح عليهما أن يصلحا بينهما صلحا والصلح خير وأحضرت الأنفس الشح وإن تحسنوا وتتقوا فإن الله كان بما تعملون خبيرا ولن تستطيعوا أن تعدلوا بين النساء ولو حرصتم فلا تميلوا كل الميل فتذروها كالمعلقة وإن تصلحوا وتتقوا فإن الله كان غفورا رحيما وإن يتفرقا يغن الله كلا من سعته وكان الله واسعا حكيما ولله ما في السماوات وما في الأرض ولقد وصينا الذين أوتوا الكتاب من قبلكم وإياكم ولقد وصينا الذين أوتوا الكتاب من قبلكم وإياكم أن اتقوا الله وإن تكفروا فإن لله ما في السماوات وما في الأرض وكان الله غنيا حميدا ولله ما في السماوات وما في الأرض وكفى بالله وكيلا إن يشأ يذهبكم أيها الناس ويأتي بآخرين وكان الله على ذلك قديرا من كان يريد ثواب الدنيا فعند الله ثواب الدنيا والآخرة وكان الله سميعا بصيرا صدق الله العظيم. Theme of social issues, where we left off last time, we were talking about the implementation of justice in society, especially when it came to the family. And the discussion continues today within that realm of family issues. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala advises specifically in this case in terms of the husband and the wife relationship. The spousal relationship is the bedrock of the family unit. And inshallah we'll discuss briefly the messages from the verses here. But then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala continues and reminds us about a very important concept, which is the basis of the heavens and the earth, which is the basis of the way Allah has created this system. And with emphasis on that, 3 times Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions the same topic, same concept over and over again. Then inshallah we'll move on to messages from historical actions of people. And we will inshallah point towards that as well. We begin with a question. And the question is, what does a couple do when they have issues, incoherence, incongruence, difficulties, conflict within themselves? And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in this case, brings up the issue of something called nushuz. Nushuz is when either the husband doesn't give the rights of the wife, or the wife does not give the rights of the husband. Now, in this verse that we will be reciting, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala specifically talks about the nushuz of the husband, where the husband does not give and fulfill the rights of the wife. Whereas in the other parts of the surah, Allah has talked about nushuz of the woman, where the woman does not give the rights of the man. Now, in this verse, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَإِنْ امْرَأَةٌ خَافَتْ مِنْ بَعْلِهَا نُشُوزًا أَوْ إِعْرَاضًا. If there's a woman who is fearful from her husband that he will not fulfill her rights, or he will turn away from her in a way that he doesn't want her anymore, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has one simple rule. And since the family unit is very sensitive, it is a very delicate situation. Even though Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has clear-cut rules and expectations from both the husband and the wife, obviously when two people are living together, they are starting their life, they are forming a bond, they are creating a family unit, which will be the basic unit of society. There needs to be a lot of give and take. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants that give and take to take place. And Allah says, فَلَا جُنَاحَ عَلَيْهِمَا أَن يُصْلِحَ بَيْنَهُمَا صُلْحًا. The key word here is sulh. The key word here is to give and take, to reach a settlement, to reach a state that both sides are happy. And this is a very important concept. To think of divorce as the first and foremost solution to family conflict is not there in Islam. The very first way to resolve conflict in a family is to do sulh. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَالصُّلْحُ خَيْرٌ. And sulh, reaching a settlement, wiggling your way out of the situation, being patient, being perseverant, trying your way to help the situation and finding a solution is the way forward. And Allah gives a blanket ruling here. It says, وَالصُّلْحُ خَيْرٌ. That sulh in all situations is better. وَأُحْضِرَتِ الْأَنفُسُ الشُّحَّ. Even though the nafs amara, always wants to be bakhil, it wants its way, that I always is there to ruin the situation. But Allah says, وَإِن تُحْسِنُوا وَتَتَّقُوا فَإِنَّ اللَّهَ كَانَ بِمَا تَعْمَلُونَ خَبِيرًا. If you do ihsan, and if you persevere with taqwa, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is indeed knowing what you perform, what you do. Now, let's keep this as our first message from this verse, where Allah says, sulh in terms of doing ihsan and taqwa. Okay, so the first situation is achieving or implementing sulh in the family between the husband and the wife through ihsan and through taqwa. We will move on, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives a similar strategy in a different situation, and we'll compare them inshallah. And there's a very fine message coming out of this. The next verse, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is now dealing with the situation of polygamy. Now it's no longer a single husband, single wife situation. It's a single husband with multiple wives. And this is where things get a bit more sensitive, a bit more difficult. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala openly tells the Muslim man that if you can maintain justice, then go ahead and marry more than one. Right? But if you cannot maintain justice, فَوَاحِدًا, only one. Okay? So that is at the level of the huquq and the rights of the woman, at the level of her nafaqa, the maintenance that he needs to perform in terms of the rights of the lady. But then Allah also says, indeed, if you have multiple women, it's difficult to maintain justice at the level of your love for each one of them. And Allah points to that. He says, وَلَن تَسْتَطِيعُوا أَن تَعْدِلُوا بَيْنَ النِّسَاءِ. And you will not be able to perform adl and justice between the women. وَلَوْ حَرَصْتُمْ. Even if you may want to do that, even if you try your best. Honestly, a man, if he has multiple wives, he may love one wife more than the other. Then that's at the level of the heart. Allah here is not expecting that at the level of the heart also you love each woman equally. And He says it's not possible. It's not possible. But at the level of giving the rights in terms of food, clothing, shelter, and so on, you have to be equal. You have to do justice. And this was actually one of the issues. One of the companions of Imam Sadiq alayhi salam was faced by this issue by an atheist of his time, Ibn Abi al-Awjab. He comes to Hisham, a companion of Imam Sadiq, and he says, how is it possible? One place in the Quran, Allah says that you must do adl, you must be fair and just with the woman, and the other place, in this exact place, وَلَن تَسْتَطِيعُوا أَن تَعْدِلُوا. He says you will not be able to perform justice. Isn't this a contradiction in the Holy Quran? Hisham was not able to answer it. He travels all the way from Kufa to Medina to be in the presence of Imam Sadiq alayhi salam. And he asked Imam, what is the solution to this issue? And that is when we know we need interpreters of the Holy Quran who are aware of the message of the Holy Quran inside out. Imam tells him, if you look at the qarina, if you look at the verses before and after, the context that exists for this verse, it talks about the heart and the love that a man has for his ladies. But the other verse talks about the level of maintenance and giving the rights of clothing, shelter, and food. And that is where Hisham was able to respond to the question of Abi al-Awjab. And the verse continues and says, فَلَا تَمِيلُوا كُلَّ الْمَيْلِ. And this mail, as a matter of fact, is inclination of the heart. And Allah says, do not incline towards one side or towards one of the wives completely. كُلَّ الْمَيْلِ فَلَا تَمِيلُوا كُلَّ الْمَيْلِ فَتَذَرُوهَا كَالْمُعَلَّقَةِ. You will leave your other wife hanging. كَالْمُعَلَّقَةِ. Mu'allaqa comes from the word alaq, to be hanging. And do not leave her hanging. If you do not want her, let her go. But if you can do sulh, and that is the message here. وَإِن تُصْلِحُوا وَتَتَّقُوا فَإِنَّ اللَّهَ كَانَ غَفُورًا رَحِيمًا. If you can do sulh and improve the situation and perform taqwa, maintain things with taqwa, then indeed Allah is all forgiving and merciful. Now, interestingly, we looked at the previous verse where Allah was talking about one-on-one relationship between one husband and one wife, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ends the advice as وَإِن تُحْسِنُوا وَتَتَّقُوا. If you do ihsan and have taqwa. In this place where a person has multiple wives, Allah leaves a message and advice at this level. He says وَإِن تُصْلِحُوا وَتَتَّقُوا. If you do islah and have taqwa. Now, one thing is common everywhere, and we will find in the following verses as well, the emphasis on taqwa is repetitive. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala throughout the Holy Quran is inviting us towards taqwa. It's telling us that the solution to all of our problems, whether at the level of the family, whether at the level of society, whether at the economic level, whether at the political level, whether at our own personal level to fight the nafs, is taqwa. Is to maintain the limits of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Maintaining the wajib and keeping away from the haram and keeping a check on ourselves constantly. And that is taqwa. Now, why is in one place Allah saying ihsan and taqwa and the other place Allah saying islah and taqwa? It's very interesting. When people are together and when you have multiple people that expect the fulfillment of their rights, obviously, people have different tastes, people have different perceptions, and you cannot please everybody. And that's something we know as human beings. But how do we go about doing this? We come to a state where we can perform islah. That we come to a settlement, we come to an understanding. We do not go the individualistic way that this society is trying to tell us, that every man for himself, every woman for herself. You do what you like, and you will get what you want. No. The movement in Islam is, even if you're living in a community in a collective fashion, Islah is the way forward. And Imam Hussein alayhi salam, when he rose with his mission, what did he say? I am rising the talab al-islah fi ummati jadd. Islah is a state which brings things to the best possible condition while taking everybody together, not letting anybody be left alone on the side. Take everybody together, but keeping with the values that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala expects us to implement, and we perform Islah. In the previous verse, Allah says ihsan and taqwa. That's also very interesting. When it comes to the husband and wife relationship, Allah obviously expects adl. إِنَّ اللَّهَ يَأْمُرُ بِالْعَدْلِ وَالْإِحْسَانِ. Allah expects adl for sure. But here He's saying, make sure you also do ihsan. Taqwa is that tool that will help us get to adl and ihsan. But Imam Amirul Mu'mineen says in one of the hadiths, at the level of society, go with adl, because adl gives every single person their due share, their rights. But when it comes to ihsan, ihsan is at the personal level. You give from your own haqq to somebody to please them or to solve a situation, and usually if a person from the outside is looking at ihsan, he might feel that somebody is being unjust here. And therefore society needs to be governed based on adl. But when you are dealing at the individual level, use ihsan to bring hearts together. And that is again here, for a husband and the wife, not only there is adl, but also ihsan, so that the movement of the cherished love between husband and wife is always moving forward. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala continues and says, وَإِن يَتَفَرَّقَا. Now, if Islah doesn't work, if you try your best, adl doesn't work, ihsan doesn't work, the husband and the wife are not wanting to change for the better. They do not want the situation to improve. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, and if they separate, يُغْنِ اللَّهُ كُلًّا مِنْ سَعَتِهِ. He will make both sides, all people in the equation, needless out of Allah's vastness, out of His bounty, out of His mercy. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will make sure none of the two sides eventually falls into a difficult situation. For Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَكَانَ اللَّهُ وَاسِعًا حَكِيمًا. Indeed, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is all-encompassing and wise. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the second half of this page, in 3 places, seeks to remind us of one very important concept. And He repeats this point 3 times. And He says, وَلِلَّهِ مَا فِي السَّمَاوَاتِ وَمَا فِي الْأَرْضِ. And then He mentions a bit, then He comes and says, فَإِنَّ لِلَّهِ مَا فِي السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ. Again He mentions a bit, and then He says, وَلِلَّهِ مَا فِي السَّمَاوَاتِ وَمَا فِي الْأَرْضِ. And there's something interesting going on here. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is trying to remind us that, hey, human being, never ever for a single moment think that what you have is yours independent of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. لِلَّهِ مَا فِي السَّمَاوَاتِ وَمَا فِي الْأَرْضِ. It is only for Allah. It is Allah's. What you have is a trust from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, what is the context in which Allah is repeating this 3 times? So let's look at that. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on one hand, when He's saying the husband and the wife, if they separate and there is a divorce, Allah will make them needless from His vastness. He says, why? Because indeed for Allah is what is in the heavens and what is in the earth. Then He continues and says, وَلَقَدْ وَصَّيْنَا الَّذِينَ أُوتُوا الْكِتَابَ مِنْ قَبْلِكُمْ وَإِيَّاكُمْ أَنِ اتَّقُوا اللَّهَ. Indeed we have enjoined upon the people before you and upon you that you must take care of your issues based on taqwa. You must pursue a God-centered life. Be God-fearing. Be fearful of the consequences of your action near Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And again, why does Allah say we've enjoined taqwa upon not only those people before you, but we're also enjoining it upon you. Just like in fasting, where He says, كُتِبَ عَلَيْكُمُ الصِّيَامُ كَمَا كُتِبَ عَلَى الَّذِينَ مِنْ قَبْلِكُمْ. There is a social unity. We get emotionally united with people who were before us. There's a historical connection to people before us as well. That, hey, these things are not new. These were existing before us as well. And this was Allah's expectation of people before us, just like it is on us as well. If fasting is an expectation from Allah, And likewise, taqwa is an expectation of Allah on us and on people before us. And Allah says, وَإِن تَكْفُرُوا, and if you now move away. Now, kufr means, is at multiple levels, but literally means to move away, turn away, right? To reject. Here, Allah is speaking about kufr in the context of taqwa. If you do not pursue taqwa and turn away from it, but remember, إِنَّ لِلَّهِ مَا فِي السَّمَاوَاتِ وَمَا فِي الْأَرْضِ. Again, remember that whatever is there in the heavens and the earth, it is Allah's alone. وَكَانَ اللَّهُ غَنِيًّا حَمِيدًا. And indeed, Allah is needless and praiseworthy. And then again, Allah comes and says, وَلِلَّهِ مَا فِي السَّمَاوَاتِ وَمَا فِي الْأَرْضِ. Now, if you feel that on one hand you need something, Allah will provide you. But on the other hand, if you do kufr and turn away and reject, then also remember that Allah is needless. Allah has everything. And again, if you feel that there is nobody to support you, if you do tawakkul, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is there for you. And everything is at the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَكَفَى بِاللَّهِ وَكِيلًا. And indeed, Allah is sufficient as a wakil, as a person who can take things forward for a person. إِن يَشَأْ يُذْهِبْكُمْ. And here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling the Muslims, and there's a specific historical connotation here as well. Allah says, إِن يَشَأْ يُذْهِبْكُمْ أَيُّهَا النَّاسُ وَيَأْتِي بِآخَرِينَ. If Allah wills, He will replace you and bring people in place of you. O people. Now here, the people being referred to are the Arabs, the Muslims of that time. And when this verse was revealed, the Prophet was sitting, and Salman al-Farsi al-Muhammadi was sitting next to him. And Rasulullah puts his hand on Salman and he says, the people from Fars will be the people who will be replaced by you. They will be replacing you. And this is another idea, that the Muslims realized that in the future, even though at that time Iran, Persia, was a mushrik empire, it was Zoroastrian apparently, but it was a place which was ruled by non-Islamic values. The Muslims realized that in the future, indeed, the people of Fars, Persia, will become Muslim, and they will become such Muslims, such committed people, that they will replace the Arab Muslims in their commitment to Islam. And we see it in today's world as well. Around the world, we see that patting of Rasulullah on the back of Salman al-Farsi coming to light before the whole Muslim world, before the whole world. That إِن يَشَأْ يُذْهِبْكُمْ أَيُّهَا النَّاسُ وَيَأْتِي بِآخَرِينَ وَكَانَ اللَّهُ عَلَى ذَلِكَ قَدِيرًا. Never ever feel that if Islam came to you first of all, that you will keep that badge of Islam on your chest and claim to be the defenders of Islam in any time and any year. No. It is the amal that is the criteria for the people to stand by the values of Islam. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the end here, this page, reminds us of a very important point, that we usually think that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when He expects us to be religious, we are only ensuring our hereafter. But as a matter of fact, if somebody is religious, somebody lives a life of spirituality, not only their hereafter is maintained, their dunya will also be ensured. Allah says, مَنْ كَانَ يُرِيدُ ثَوَابَ الدُّنْيَا فَعِنْدَ اللَّهِ ثَوَابُ الدُّنْيَا وَالْآخِرَةِ. The one who wants the thawab of the dunya, Allah is trying to tell us, be it known, near Allah is the thawab and the reward of the dunya and the akhirah. And Allah tells us in other parts of the Holy Qur'an, there are people who say, رَبَّنَا آتِنَا فِي الدُّنْيَا حَسَنَةً وَمَا لَهُ فِي الْآخِرَةِ مِنْ خَلَاقٍ. There are people who specifically pray for the dunya, say, oh Allah, give us good in this dunya, but then in the hereafter there is nothing. But then there are people who say, رَبَّنَا آتِنَا فِي الدُّنْيَا حَسَنَةً وَفِي الْآخِرَةِ حَسَنَةً وَقِنَا عَذَابَ النَّارِ. Goodness of this world, the benefits and luxuries that are halal of this world, the nice aspects of life of this world, and give us the good things of the hereafter as well, and save us from the fire of hell. And Allah ends this verse with وَكَانَ اللَّهُ سَمِيعًا basira. Be it known that Allah is all hearing and all seeing. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give us the tawfiq to read the verses of the Qur'an, to be able to memorize the verses of the Holy Qur'an, to be able to reflect deeply on the verses of the Holy Qur'an, to be able to apply the Holy Qur'an into our lives and live by the Quranic spirit day in and day out. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us reach that stage that we have the Qur'an and the Imam of our time together before us, and we become from his close companions and followers, and from those who will prepare for his eventual coming. Inshallah ta'ala, we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to forgive us and our mahroomeen, especially request to remember Sheikh Ali Rasul. He was buried, according to us, early in the morning, and tonight is the night for us basically to recite Salatul Wahsha. Inshallah, today after Salatul Isha, we can take a moment to recite Salatul Wahsha for him. His name was Ali Azhar, son of Riyadh Ali. Inshallah ta'ala, we remember him with the Surah Al-Mubarakatul Fatiha